Today, we're diving into a really incredible story about what happens when a system completely collapses. We're looking at how a massive crisis in Kentucky's refugee support system didn't just lead to a clever fix, but sparked a full-blown economic revolution. So just picture this for a second. For over 40 years, you have perfected a system for welcoming people. You've got the staff, you've got the infrastructure, all the expertise. And then, almost overnight, the tap is turned off. The pipeline of new arrivals just stops. This was the huge existential threat facing Kentucky's refugee agencies. It was a crisis that honestly threatened to completely dismantle decades of work. But that crisis, it forced a fundamental rethink. It sparked this major shift away from a pretty fragile model that was all about survival jobs to a much more resilient one, focused on sustainable enterprise and real career advancement for the community that was already there. Okay, so let's get into it. How did a system that seemed to work perfectly fine for 4 decades suddenly become so incredibly vulnerable? Well, the core of the problem was the funding model itself. It was a volume-based system. Basically, agencies got paid a one-time federal grant for each new person they helped resettle. So, when the number of arrivals was high, everything worked. But the moment that number dropped to near zero, their main revenue stream just instantly vanished, creating this terrifying financial cliff. And this wasn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. The collapse had a real, immediate human cost. We're talking about a serious brain drain. One regional center announced 15% staff layoffs, which was basically the canary in the coal mine for a statewide crisis. You had all these experienced, culturally skilled professionals suddenly losing their jobs. But this is where the story really pivots. Because while that pipeline of new arrivals was totally empty, leaders started to realize that a massive, overlooked asset was hiding right there in plain sight. In this analogy, it just captures the new mindset perfectly. The focus shifted away from the empty pipeline and toward the full reservoir. And what was in that reservoir? Thousands of refugees already living in Kentucky, many of them stuck in low-wage survival jobs, but totally ready and eager for the next step. See, here's the critical flaw in the old system. Its job was basically done once a person got their first job. There was no funding, no incentive to help someone move from, say, a warehouse position to a professional career 2 or 3 years down the line. The whole system valued initial placement over long-term advancement, and that left enormous human potential just sitting on the table. So, to fix a problem this big, you need a new kind of collaboration. This crisis actually forged this really unlikely alliance, a kind of cross-sector dream team between the established nonprofits and a new breed of social entrepreneurs. On one side, you had the anchor institutions, right? Organizations like Catholic Charities and Kentucky Refugee Ministries. They had decades of community trust, they had the infrastructure, but they were super financially exposed and stuck in that old grant-dependent model. And then on the other side of the team, you had the agile innovators, people like immigrant entrepreneur Tran and veteran banker Rick Dye. They brought serious financial savvy and a proven training model to the table. They looked at that full reservoir and didn't see a liability, they saw a huge market opportunity. Okay, so this alliance gets together, and their first move was, honestly, a total masterstroke. They tackled the revenue crisis head-on by completely rethinking what it means to serve the community. They pivoted from resettlement to retraining. Their strategy was just so simple, yet so powerful. First, they reclassified their clients. They realized they weren't just refugees under the State Department's rules, they were WIOA-eligible adults under the Department of Labor. And that right there unlocked a whole new stable funding stream. Then, they took the agency's now empty offices and turned them into satellite training campuses, bringing the opportunity directly to the people. And when you put these two models side by side, wow, the difference is just night and day. The old model? Frozen. It relied on new arrivals and offered about $2,300 for an entry-level job. The new WIOA model, it's active and funded. It's triggered by enrolling existing community members, and it provides up to $6,000 for training that leads to a state license and a real long-term career. But they didn't stop at just fixing the jobs problem. The alliance then went after one of the biggest, most persistent challenges facing the community: stable, affordable housing. And this, of course, posed a huge question. You've got people who need homes, and you've got community partners like local churches with all this underutilized land. The missing piece of the puzzle was the capital, the financial engineering needed to actually connect the need with the asset. Their solution was this brilliant model they called love housing. And you can see here it was a true partnership where every single stakeholder played a critical role. The Archdiocese contributed the land,
The New American Business Association was the developer, local banks provided the capital, and KRM was there to refer the tenants. Everyone had a piece of the puzzle.
So how'd they actually make it work financially? Well, this is where it gets really smart. They took what they called the lazy equity from that unused church land and turned it into an active housing asset. Then they used tax credits to get banks to invest. They even integrated a wellness center, staffed by beauty academy students, which lowered the building's operating costs and provided a vital service to senior residents. The agencies literally went from being renters to being owners.
So, let's zoom out. What does this all add up to? Because this is so much more than just a comeback story for a few agencies in Kentucky. This is really a new blueprint for the entire social sector.
At its heart, the really fundamental shift here is about moving from a dependency on unpredictable federal policy to achieving local sovereignty. This model empowers local organizations to build their own sustainable future, based on the assets and the talent that are already right there in their own communities.
And this quote, it just perfectly captures the whole philosophy. It's not about choosing between having a social mission and having a sustainable business model. It's about brilliantly integrating the two, using the engine of enterprise to power the heart of compassion. And that really leaves us with a final, provocative question to think about. This story from Kentucky proves that when old systems inevitably break down, the future gets built by these kinds of unlikely alliances. It's built by people who can see opportunity in a crisis, see assets in a community, and see a pathway to a better, more resilient system for everyone.